And now our third speaker, Ledon Wellon. Ledon started Faces of Fertility in 2020 to advance for reproductive health care, the access that we all have. Ledon, to you.
Hi, I'm Ledon Wellon. I'm 31 years old, and I'm one of 4.5 million Canadians who have experienced infertility. I'm also one of the 1 in 4 women who have experienced a miscarriage. I've been dealing with this since 2016 and have spent over $30,000 on medical bills directly associated with trying to conceive. Did you know that the costs associated with infertility are not covered by our government's healthcare? That the average cost of an IVF cycle is around $20,000 if you can do it within your own province? In addition to our government not counting this medical diagnosis as healthcare important enough to be covered, what is also shocking is that most major insurance companies offer little to no coverage for any medications associated with infertility, leaving the burden of dealing with a heartbreaking diagnosis an impossible feat to overcome financially, unjustly leaving millions of people without options to have a child of their own. The mental health impact of people struggling with infertility has been compared to that of a patient living with a cancer diagnosis in a study by Harvard University. People are left scarred, traumatized, heartbroken, and often tens of thousands of dollars in debt with no guarantee of bringing home a child. Infertility is often joked about, ignored, or thought of as a fun option because IVF and other fertility treatments are often glamorized on TV. Next slide, please. Before experiencing this myself, I never knew how disadvantaged Newfoundlanders and Labradorians were compared to the rest of Canada. It's only us and PEI that don't have access to a clinic within our own province, and we are the only province without either access or government funding to help with the extreme costs associated with the diagnosis. This is not only a provincial issue, but a federal government issue as well. There needs to be a government guidance and funding to make sure that all Canadians have equal access to the treatment they need in their own provinces, without having childbearing a privilege for the wealthy. It shouldn't be the burden of infertile people to make sure that the government treats us equally in healthcare. We need other people to acknowledge the inequalities that we are trying to overcome. The blatant inequality has been amplified throughout the COVID-19 pandemic. Thousands of women have had an extraordinary amount of extra stress added to an already difficult journey, with clinic closures, canceled cycles, and travel restrictions within our country. I never knew how absolutely inaccessible our reproductive health care was until I had women from all over the province reaching out, asking me what they could do, since they'd already taken thousands of dollars worth of medications right before lockdowns, which meant their medications, the toll on their body, and the time taken from the beginning steps of the treatment were all gone to waste. How are they now supposed to afford an extra 4 weeks off of work to travel and isolate here and as well as the place that they were getting their treatment? Were they just supposed to give up on the hopes of having a child this year? Next slide, please. I too was caught during treatment with COVID shutdowns. I went to Calgary, Alberta in March for IVF, days before the first cases in North America. I traveled so far because I had family to stay with and I needed to save the money of hotels and car rentals to make this possible for me. Every morning I'd go to my clinic and be told, we'll continue for today, but we have no idea if we're going to be open tomorrow. Thankfully, I was able to complete my cycle, but the added stress could have been the reason that it didn't work for me. I had to return home again without being pregnant and with no idea of when I would be able to return to the embryos that I had waiting for me in Calgary. Clinics opened sporadically across Canada, with Newfoundland and Labradors being the last, and resuming practice only after the opening of our malls. It became clear that the healthcare system and the government did not see our extremely time-sensitive issues as a priority, even though many other places around the world had deemed it an essential service. We were promised that we wouldn't be shut down again, but in February, even after a news briefing stating that we would remain open, they shut their doors for the second time. We had been lied to, our emotions played with, and the opening the second time only after being publicly called out for the inequality and mistreatment of the infertile community. This could have been avoided if anyone had listened to the pained cries of the people who have fought before me. If we had access to a clinic in Newfoundland and Labrador, if insurance companies and healthcare deemed it important enough to help those of us who are struggling, if people took what society deemed as a women's only medical problem and included it with other essential healthcare, maybe then we could have a thriving population. Maybe then we could have less young people with mental health issues, And maybe then we could have more happy and complete families living in this beautiful province. Thank you.
Ledon, thank you so very much, Ledon. And now